Before you watch this, ask yourself something. Would you shovel snow for people who never said your name? Would you stay in a place where no one knew your story just so someone else could be warm or safe or seen? This is not a story about power. It's not a story about revenge. It's a story about a janitor living at the edge of the world who no one thought twice about until a letter arrived. And when that letter was opened, everything changed. Our story takes place in Arctic Alaska at a high-security climate monitoring station called Aurora North. It runs year-round. Each winter, a 12-person team is flown in and locked down for 6 months. Scientists, engineers, medics, programmers, and one man with no title, Sam O'Connell. He shovels the snow, cleans the solar panels, fixes the coffee machine, changes the light bulbs, never complains. Most people don't even know where he sleeps. But when a blizzard traps the team and a communication relay fails, they find themselves without outside support for over 21 days. Supplies dwindle, morale breaks, arguments erupt, and it's Sam, the one no one ever asked about, who holds everything together, quietly, without asking for anything, until a forgotten package arrives with a letter, addressed not to the team, but to Sam, and suddenly, the man they ignored becomes the man they never want to lose. Sparkles, this is a story about quiet kindness, a mystery hidden in plain sight, what it means to show up for people even when they don't see you, and the beautiful things that happen when someone finally says, I see you. I know who you are. Thumbs up if you believe good people deserve to be seen. Backhand index pointing right, like this video. Pushpin subscribe for more stories like this. Because sometimes the biggest hearts wear the smallest uniforms. And sometimes the janitor is the one who keeps the world turning. They say no one ends up at Aurora North by accident. It's not the kind of place you stumble into. It's not listed on travel sites. It doesn't even appear on Google Maps. It's a government-funded climate research station, buried in the Arctic tundra 240 miles from the nearest town and inaccessible by road for 6 months of the year. 12 people work there each winter. 12. 11 of them come in on a private plane, buzzing with credentials, hard drives, and waterproof jackets. The 12th? He's already there. His name is Sam O'Connell. He's been there for 14 winters, longer than anyone else. No degree, no plaque on the door, just a name tag with faded letters, and a job that doesn't appear in the official directory. Maintenance, mostly. Snow shoveling, pipe repairs, light bulbs, the little things that no one notices unless they're broken. And Sam? He never lets them break. Round Pushpin, October 1st, winter crew arrival day. The snow had just begun to fall when the C-140 touched down on the ice runway. The wind howled across the valley like it had a grudge. Sam stood back from the runway, in a heavy green parka, holding a shovel in one hand and a small walkie in the other. He watched the new arrivals step out. Engineers, researchers, med techs, one IT coordinator. All of them young, bright, a little anxious. None of them waved at him. One woman, Dr. Ainsley Grant, looked his way briefly, then turned back to her tablet. Another, Max, the logistics officer, walked right past him, nearly bumping his shoulder. Sam didn't take it personally. He never did. He just nodded slightly and kept shoveling the runway. Ice cubed the facility. Aurora North looked like something out of a sci-fi movie. All sharp angles and steel siding, perched on stilts to keep the lower deck above the drifting snow. Inside, the floors gleamed. The lights never flickered. And the heat never failed, because Sam made sure of it. He lived in a small unit beneath the main station near the fuel systems. No one ever visited him there. But he visited them every night, checking on generators, water pressure, freezer locks, and sometimes, when no one was watching, refilling the coffee machines. The scientists rarely spoke to him. They weren't rude, just busy, focused. They didn't know that Sam read. A lot. That his room had more books than clothes. That he could fix anything from a broken drone to a jammed hydro sensor. They didn't ask, and Sam never offered. Radio night won silence. On his first night with the new winter team, Sam did what he always did. He cleaned the common room after they went to bed, wiped down counters, checked air filters, left a fresh pot of coffee brewing for the morning. Then he stepped outside, alone, looked up at the stars, and whispered to himself, "Still here, Eileen." Gloves Sam's rules for living here. He never wrote them down, but they were etched into every habit. 1. Don't expect anyone to ask your story. 2. Do the job before anyone notices it needs doing. 3. Always have backup parts. 4. Leave people better than you found them, even if they don't know it. 5. Don't forget why you came here. Most people assumed he was ex-military, or maybe an ex-con. He never confirmed or denied either. The truth? He was a school janitor once. And before that, a mechanic. And before that, a husband. And once a father. Package the unopened locker. Down in storage room C, tucked behind extra filters and a rusted snowmobile, was a gray locker with his name on it. No one ever touched it. No one ever asked. Inside it was a metal box. Inside that box was a letter. Unopened. Stamped. Yellowing. Still sealed. Addressed to Samuel J. O'Connell, Aurora North Climate Station, Alaska, USA. No return address. No date. He kept it locked away for 7 years. Why? Because it came the day after everything ended. Luggage. Meanwhile, the crew settles in. They found their rhythms. Wake-up briefings. Equipment checks. Data analysis. Field expeditions. Every so often, someone would radio down, "Sam, panel 4's covered in snow again. Sam, the Wi-Fi's down. Sam, the printer's jammed." He always came, always fixed it, always left without needing a thank you. One night, Max walked past the common room and saw Sam asleep on the couch, boots still on, a blanket half draped over him. He looked so tired, and yet peaceful. Max hesitated. "Hey, you okay?" Sam stirred, smiled slightly. "Fine. Just listening to the boiler," and went back to sleep. Max walked away confused. Boiler? There hadn't been a sound. Snowflake, the storm begins. Near the end of October, the radio forecast turned red. A winter cyclone, rare, massive, heading straight for them. Winds up to 120 miles per hour. Whiteout for 3 to 5 days. Aurora North lockdown. Emergency protocols kicked in. Satellite comms reduced to emergency only. No new shipments. No help coming. The team started to fray. Tension over rations. Arguments over oxygen backup. Tempers, once polite, began to crack. And Sam? Still silent. Still moving. Checking seals. Securing vents. Delivering flashlights outside every door. No one asked him to. He just did it. And on the 4th night of the storm, when the main generator flickered, and every screen in the control room went dark, he was already downstairs hand-cranking the reserve power. When it came back on, no one knew how. They just assumed the system reset. But Max saw it on the security feed later. Sam, alone, in the cold, powering the station by hand. Max didn't say anything to the others. But that night, he left a thermos of hot tea outside Sam's door. No note. Just a gesture. The storm passed. After 5 days of howling wind and zero visibility, the sky cracked open with a silence that felt alien. The snow was piled shoulder-high outside the main entrance. The satellite dome had iced over. But Aurora North was intact. Lights still on. Air warm. No injuries. All thanks to the janitor no one noticed. The team came out cautiously, stretching legs, breathing in stale cold air. A kind of quiet fell over the station, the kind that comes after surviving something big. Someone muttered, "Guess the old guy really pulled us through, huh?" Max nodded but didn't speak. He still hadn't told them about the security footage. Something about it felt personal, like Sam deserved to have one secret left. Package the delivery. 3 days after the storm, a snow-run drone made a supply drop. Basic provisions. Reinforced weather gear. A few overdue shipments. The box was left just outside the airlock. Inside, cans, batteries, spare gloves, and at the bottom, a small envelope. Water-stained, yellowed, sealed. Max picked it up. Weird. There was no department name, No barcode. Just a handwritten address. To Sam O'Connell, Aurora North Station, Winter Crew. Max knocked on the door to Level B, where Sam stayed. No answer. So, he left it sitting just inside the hallway. That night, Sam found it. His eyes lingered on the handwriting. He turned it over. No return address. No stamp, just like the first one. His hands trembled slightly. He walked back to his room, closed the door, and sat on the edge of his cot. He stared at the letter for a long time, then opened it, scrolled the letter. It wasn't long, just a single page, typed with a signature, and it read, "To Mr. Samuel O'Connell, I don't know if you still work there. I don't know if this will even reach you, but I needed to try. My name is Ellie Carson. I'm 24 years old. My mother's name was Rebecca O'Connell. She was your daughter. She passed away in 2006. She told me, before she died, that you worked somewhere far north. A place with snow, with silence. She said you never stopped writing her letters, even when she stopped answering. I found them all. You don't know me, and I don't expect you to write back. But I just wanted to say, I see you. I know who you are, and I hope you're okay. Ellie." Sam didn't cry. Not immediately. He just held the paper in both hands, like it might disappear. Then he leaned back, closed his eyes, and whispered, "She had a daughter." Mantelpiece Glock flashback 14 winters ago. He had been a janitor at a high school in Oregon. Lived quietly. Married once. Estranged from his daughter. Years of mistakes he couldn't undo. Then came the accident. She was in the hospital. He drove 11 hours through the snow, but he was too late. She never woke up. But a nurse handed him a box. Inside, letters. All returned. Unopened. His letters. She had kept them. Every one. Sam left the town that winter. Found a job no one wanted. In the cold. Far away. He wasn't running from the pain. He was running to somewhere he could still be useful. And for 14 years, he was, repeat button, back to the present. The next morning, Sam quietly walked to Max's station. Held out the letter. "She found me." Max scanned it, eyes wide. "Your granddaughter?" Sam nodded. "I didn't know she existed." Max swallowed hard. "Do you want to write her back?" Sam hesitated, then said, "I don't know what to say." Max smiled. "Start with what you've done." "What do you mean?" "Sam, you just saved 12 people during the worst storm of the decade. Maybe start there." Receipt Sam's reply, written that night. He sat down at the small metal desk in his room, took a piece of lined paper from a drawer, and began to write, slowly, deliberately, like the words had waited years to come out. "Dear Ellie, thank you for finding me. I didn't know your name until yesterday, but I've thought of you every single day since 2006. Your mother was the best thing I ever had, even when I didn't deserve her. I work at a place called Aurora North. There's snow in every direction, and the wind never really stops. But I fix things here. That's what I do. I fix heaters. I fix lights. I fix cracked wires and broken doors. And some days, I try to fix the part of me that wishes I had found you sooner. I don't know what happens next, but I want you to know, I'm here. I'm still here. Sam." Max never meant to tell anyone. He thought the letter was Sam's to share, or not. But something changed after he read it. He couldn't stop thinking about how a man could work in silence for 14 winters just to stay useful. Not to be remembered. Not to be thanked. Just to keep someone else warm. So, when the team gathered for Friday night debrief, a weekly tradition, Max said something unexpected. "I want to nominate Sam for the Polar Service ribbon." Silence. One of the biologists looked up. "Sam? The janitor?" Max smiled, but it wasn't amused. "Yeah, the guy who fixed the backup generator with his hands during the storm. The one who's been here longer than anyone in this room. The one who hasn't missed a single shift since we landed." Someone muttered, "Didn't even know he lived on site." Max nodded. "Exactly." Eyes suddenly people started seeing. That night, someone left a tray of muffins outside Sam's door. No note. The next day, the head engineer asked him if he wanted to sit in on the morning systems check. He said no, politely. He wasn't looking for attention. But people kept asking, Where'd you learn to fix the solar core? How long have you actually worked here? Do you ever get bored? Sam always answered kindly, but briefly. Speech balloon, then came the first real conversation. It was Ainsley Dr. Grant who finally asked the question that mattered. She found him sitting near the outer vent tower, reading a paperback novel. She sat next to him. Hey, Sam. Yes, ma'am. Why'd you come here? He looked out at the snow, then said, I came here to matter. Quietly. She blinked. Well, you do. Not always, but lately maybe. She asked what he was reading. He handed her the book, The Old Man and the Sea. She smiled. Classic. He chuckled. That fish never stood a chance. Incoming envelope. The letter reaches Ellie. Meanwhile, 3,000 miles away in Pittsburgh, Ellie Carson stood in the lobby of a walk-up apartment holding a plain envelope in her hand. Her hands shook. She hadn't expected a reply, let alone one this human. She read it 3 times in a row, then sat down on her front steps and cried. Not because it was sad, but because someone out there, someone who loved her mom, was still alive, still trying. Telephone receiver. The call. Max was finishing inventory when Sam walked in. I need a favor. Anything. Can I use the secure line? Of course. Want me to step out? Please. Sam picked up the headset, typed in the number from the envelope. 3 rings. Then a voice. Hello. He paused. His voice cracked a little when he said, Ellie. They talked for 12 minutes. No more. But that call did something to Sam's face. Max saw it when he came back in. It wasn't joy exactly. It was relief. Megaphone word spreads. Within days, the rest of the crew knew. They didn't talk about it directly. Sam still liked his peace. But the mood shifted. People started noticing the little things. He put spare hand warmers in everyone's boots. Left joke sticky notes on the broken printer. Sharpened every pencil in the lab, even though no one asked. He'd been doing it all along. They just hadn't looked. Microphone the toast. At the end-of-month team dinner, held in the mess hall under dim yellow lights, Max stood up with a coffee mug in hand. I know we usually toast the science, the work, the mission, but tonight, I want to toast the man who made all of that possible. He turned to Sam, to the one who keeps the lights on, and our hearts warmer than they'd be without him. To Sam. The room echoed back. To Sam. Sam didn't stand, didn't give a speech. He just nodded, eyes glistening, hands shaking slightly. Brain later that night, Sam opened the letter from Ellie again. This time he turned it over, wrote on the back, maybe I'm not done fixing things yet. He folded it carefully, put it in his shirt pocket, and for the first time in 14 winters, he walked into the common room. Just to be there. No mop, no tools, no reason. Just him. The radar pinged just past midnight. Max was in the comms room, scanning weather data when the colors shifted on screen. Blue, then green, then deep red. No way. He leaned closer. Another storm, bigger than the last, moving faster, and packing enough wind pressure to rupture outer seals if they weren't reinforced in time. ETA, 22 hours. Megaphone the briefing. At 7 a.m., the full team was called into the main lab. Max projected the satellite feed on the wall. We're looking at Category 3 Arctic pressure. We need to seal every external hatch, check all solar batteries, and bring in the drone sleds within the next 12 hours. Tension rose. This storm wasn't supposed to happen. Not again. Not this soon. People started arguing about who would do what. Sam, as usual, said nothing. But as people were still talking, he had already left the room to start reinforcing the hatches. Hammer and wrench, the first incident. By 2 p.m., the snow had started. Wind pushing sideways, loud like sandpaper against steel. Out at Drone Bay, 2 Max and another crew member, Nina, were trying to guide in a retrieval unit when the sled hit a soft spot under the snow. Nina's foot slipped, and in a split second she was gone. Fell straight through a covered crevasse. Nina. Max dropped to his knees, shouting. All they could see was blackness and falling snow. No response. He radioed. Code red. Nina's down. Crevasse breach. We need rope now. No answer. Reception was glitching in the storm. He started to panic. Then, a hand on his shoulder. Move. It was Sam. Come. Rope in hand. Already wearing his harness. Max blinked. You don't even know how deep. I don't need to. I just need to reach her. Person climbing descent. Sam lowered himself into the dark mouth of the crevasse. Foot by foot, rope burning cold in his gloves. The wind howled above, but inside was silence. After 10 feet, nothing. 15, 20. Then a voice. Hello. Nina, Sam called out. I'm here. I think my leg's broken. I'm coming down. Max's face was white with fear. He watched the rope disappear further and further into the dark. For a moment, he thought, he's not coming back up. But 15 minutes later, the rope started to move. Then came a flashlight beam. Then them. Sam, carrying Nina. One arm around her back, one hand still gripping the rope. He reached the edge and lifted her up first, refusing help. Only once she was safe did he allow Max and the others to pull him out. He collapsed into the snow, breathing heavy, but alive. Hospital to med room. Nina would be okay. Fractured fibula, sprained wrist, shaken but stable. The medic thanked Sam over and over. He just nodded and sat in the corner. Max walked in. You didn't even hesitate. Sam looked up tired. She fell. I was close. That's all there was to it. Max shook his head. That's not all. That's who you are. Open mailbox with raised flag, Ellie's second letter. That night, the mail drop arrived. Drone delivery before the storm cut access completely. Inside was a handwritten envelope. Sam opened it slowly. Dear Sam, you said you fix things. I think maybe you fix people too. I told my therapist about you. About your letter. She said it's the first time I smiled in months. I don't know if I'm ready to meet yet, but I want to write again. And I want to know what you're like. What do you eat? What do you read? What does the sky look like when no one else is there? Write me back. Not to fix me. Just to talk. Ellie. Sam folded the letter slowly, held it in his hands, and for the first time in years, he allowed himself to cry. Not for the pain, but for the grace of being invited back. Ice Cube, meanwhile, the storm hits. Wind slammed the side of the building like a freight train. Temperature dropped below -40 degrees Celsius. The team locked down. Lights flickered. Tension rose. And yet, people were calm. Because Sam had already triple-checked every seal. They trusted him. Not just because of what he knew, but because of who he was. Speech ballooned the conversation that changed Max. Later that night, during a lull, Max sat across from Sam in the dim mess hall. What if I told you? I came here to run away? Sam smiled. I'd say you came to the right place. And you? Why'd you stay? Sam stirred his tea, then said, I couldn't save my daughter, but I could save the heat, the lights, the people in the storm. So I stayed where I could still be useful. Max didn't speak, because there was nothing left to say. The storm passed, winds died, sun broke through like it was shy. The whole station felt lighter, like it had been holding its breath for days. People returned to routines. Nina was walking again, slowly but smiling. And Sam? He was already back outside, shoveling paths, checking seals, sweeping snow from the solar panels. Like nothing had changed, but everything had. Round pushpin, a quiet movement begins. It started with Max. He pulled up the Polar Service medal application, normally reserved for military or career government staff. Technically, Sam didn't qualify, but Max didn't care. He rewrote the application by hand. Title, for exceptional civilian service in extreme conditions. He added incident reports, photos from the storm, signed testimony from every crew member. Then Ainsley added her voice. He didn't just save Nina. He kept us alive, whether we noticed or not. Then the medic. Then the engineer. Then, one by one, the entire crew signed the application. They gave him a file with no explanation. Max left it on Sam's workbench. Inside, the application, letters, photos, and a single note on top. because you never would have asked, but we will. Sam read every page, quietly, then folded the file shut, and cried, not like before, quiet tears into a sleeve, but openly, at his bench, like it was the first time in years someone told him, "You matter, too." Mantelpiece clock, March 2nd, the ceremony. It wasn't a government event, nothing formal, just the 12 of them. In the main lab, Max wore a tie. It didn't match. Ainsley held a clipboard like a podium. The lights were dimmed, the heater hummed, and they handed Sam a box. Inside, a medal, yes, but also something else. Scroll a new badge, printed, laminated, clipped to a lanyard. Sam O'Connell, Systems Support Specialist. He stared at it, then whispered, "I'm not a specialist." Max smiled. "You're ours." The crew applauded. Sam didn't give a speech. He just stood there, holding the badge, like it weighed more than gold. Pen a letter to Ellie. That night, Sam wrote again. "Dear Ellie, they gave me a badge today, not because I wanted one, because I think they needed to, for themselves, for what they missed before. I think I needed it too, not the title, but the reminder that I didn't disappear. You asked me what the sky looks like out here. Right now, it's purple and gold, like it knows something I don't. I'd still like to meet someday. No pressure. But I'd like that very much. Yours, Sam." Open mailbox with raised flag. Her reply came a week later. It was short, but perfect. "Let's meet when you come back. I'll bring the tea. You bring the sky." Luggage. One last scene. That spring, when the plane came to take the crew back to Anchorage, Sam was the last one on. He stood by the runway, looking at the station. One final time. Max stood beside him. "You'll be back next winter?" Sam paused, then said, "Maybe, or maybe it's time someone else kept the lights on." Max laughed. "No one does it like you." Sam turned. "That's true, but maybe I've got someone else to show now." He reached into his pocket, pulled out the photo Ellie sent. A girl in her 20s with her mother's smile. He held it like it was the Northern Lights. Airplane, Anchorage, Alaska, April 10th. It had been 14 years since Sam O'Connell last walked through a city airport. Everything was louder, faster, more crowded. The station had always been quiet, the kind of quiet that hugs your bones. Now, he could barely hear himself think. But in his pocket, right over his heart, was a folded letter. And a photo. That's what he focused on. He checked into a modest motel near downtown. Nothing fancy, just 4 walls, a bed, and a window facing the mountains. He sat by that window for a long time, watching planes take off, wondering if he still remembered how to live in a world that didn't need him every 5 minutes. He almost called it off. The meeting. Almost packed up and headed back north. But then his phone buzzed. A text. "Ellie, I'm here, outside the cafe." No rush. Hot beverage, the cafe. It was quiet inside. 2 older women reading books. A college student tapping on a laptop. Some jazz humming softly from the ceiling. And near the back, by the window, a young woman in a mustard sweater. Curly hair. Hands wrapped around a ceramic mug like it was a shield. She looked up as the door opened and froze. Eye contact. They locked eyes. She stood up slowly. Sam stopped mid-step. Neither of them spoke. Then Ellie did something he didn't expect. She smiled and walked straight into his arms. No hesitation. No speech. Just a hug. Tight, like she'd known him all her life. They sat. 2 cups of tea. One silence too big for words. Until she whispered, "You look like her." Sam choked back something soft in his chest. She was everything. Ellie nodded. "I know." Brain the conversation that mattered. They didn't talk about trauma, or death, or guilt. They talked about books, favorite meals, how neither of them liked flying. She told him she was studying environmental policy. He told her he once fixed a satellite dish with a fork and a shoelace. They laughed, actually laughed, and somewhere between the first cup and the second, Sam stopped gripping his chair. "Do you hate me?" he asked quietly. Ellie looked him dead in the eye. "No, I found your letters. You never stopped trying." He blinked, but I failed her. "Maybe, But you kept loving her. That's more than most people do. Sunrise after the tea. They walked outside. The sky was pale orange, early spring in Alaska. Ellie turned to him. Do you want to walk a bit? Anywhere. They walked through quiet streets, past bookstores, murals, ice melt puddles reflecting neon. You don't have to go back, she said suddenly. Sam raised an eyebrow. To Aurora North? Yeah, I mean, unless you want to, but there's plenty to fix down here, too. He chuckled. You offer me a job? Maybe. Pause. Maybe I'm offering you a home. That night, back at the motel, Sam pulled out a blank sheet of paper and wrote just 4 words. I made a home. He folded it, slid it into an envelope. No return address. Just 1 word on the front. Eileen. Then he walked outside, placed it in a public mailbox, and let it go. Aurora North was quiet again. The new crew had arrived, younger, tech-savvy, buzzing with certifications and jargon. But something felt different. There was a chair in the common room that no one sat in, a coat hook that stayed empty, a pair of boots in storage no one touched. Max still ran logistics, still watched the systems, but some mornings he glanced down the hallway, half expecting to hear the soft shuffle of Sam's boots. He never did, and that's when he knew. He's not coming back. Receipt, the letter Max wrote. That spring, Max opened a fresh document, typed slowly, thoughtfully. To whom it may concern, I've served at Aurora North for 7 years. I've worked with PhDs, engineers, even former astronauts. But I've never met anyone like Sam O'Connell. He was hired as a janitor. But what he really did was hold a community together in a place where people forget what community means. He saved lives, not just in the physical sense, though he did that too. He saved us from isolation, from silence, from forgetting to be kind. If this letter ever reaches a desk that can honor him, really honor him, I ask you to do it. Because some people don't make noise. They make impact. And Sam O'Connell is the quietest thunder I've ever met. Max Joy, lead logistics officer, Aurora North Research Station. He printed 5 copies, mailed 1 to the Department of Civil Service, 1 to the Arctic Humanitarian Council, 1 to the National Climate Coalition, 1 to a science journal he didn't expect to respond, and 1 to Ellie Carson, just in case Sam never told her the whole story. Open mailbox with raised flag back in Anchorage. Ellie opened the envelope one rainy morning. She sat in her kitchen, reading Max's letter with her hands trembling. When she finished, she didn't cry. She stood up, picked up her phone, and called Sam. You didn't tell me you saved someone's life. Didn't seem important. It is. You matter. And they finally wrote it down. That night, she posted a photo online. Just the medal, a coffee mug, and a caption. Asterisk, my grandfather worked 14 winters in silence. The world finally said thank you. Asterisk, it went viral. Within 24 hours, people were asking, who's Sam O'Connell? Is this a real story? Where is he now? Classical building, the unexpected invitation. 3 weeks later, an envelope arrived at Sam's motel. Inside, a plane ticket, a formal letter, and a handwritten note at the bottom. You're being honored by the Arctic Civilian Service Board. First of its kind. First inductee, you. Sam held the ticket, like it was made of snow. Ellie watched him from across the room. Will you go? He looked at her. Only if you come with me. The ceremony was held in Fairbanks, Alaska, inside a domed science museum, all glass and steel and polished floors. Rows of suits, press, officials from the Department of Civil Infrastructure, Arctic Commission, even a senator. And, in the middle of it all, Sam O'Connell sat in a chair far too fancy for his liking, wearing a jacket Ellie made him buy, with a paper in his pocket that he never planned to read. Receipt, the introduction. A tall woman in a navy blazer took the mic. Today, we honor someone who didn't lead from the front, but from the background. The man who kept a research station alive in whiteout storms, kept morale intact, and fixed everything from cracked heat valves to broken hearts. Light laughter, He never asked to be seen, but we see him now. Please welcome Mr. Sam O'Connell. Clapping hands the applause. It rose like soft thunder. Ellie squeezed his hand. Sam stood, walked to the podium, nodded politely, looked out over the crowd of polished shoes and careful haircuts, and said the one thing nobody expected. I didn't write a speech. Laughter. Real warm. I don't really do speeches. I fix things. And I drink coffee. And I shovel snow, a lot of it. The laughter softened into silence, the kind of silence that listens. I worked at Aurora North for 14 winters. Some folks thought I was hiding from the world. But really, I was looking for a way to still be useful. I didn't want praise. I wanted purpose. He paused. Turns out, when you do something for the right reason, people notice. Maybe not right away. Maybe not loudly. But eventually, kindness echoes. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small round stone, held it up. This was from the first snowman I ever made with my daughter. I've carried it ever since. He set it on the podium, not because it's valuable, but because it reminds me, even the smallest things can hold warmth. He stepped back, didn't wait for applause, just nodded, and walked off the stage. Microphone after the ceremony. People lined up to talk to him, shake his hand, thank him. He shook every hand, took every photo, even though he hated cameras. And when one kid, maybe 9 years old, walked up with a toy wrench and said, I want to be like you someday, Sam knelt down, smiled, and replied, then start by holding the door open for someone. Every day. Do that, and you're already ahead of me. Snowflake the Snowman. The next morning, Ellie found Sam outside the museum. In the side garden, the snow hadn't melted yet. He was stacking snowballs. Quietly, deliberately. What are you doing? He placed the final ball, then gently set the small stone on top, the one from his daughter, leaving something behind. People walked past, not noticing. But a little girl stopped, stared at the tiny snowman, pointed, Mommy, look? And Ellie realized that was always who Sam had been. Not the man on the stage, but the one in the garden, building something gentle for someone he might never meet. In the weeks after the ceremony, Sam O'Connell became, for lack of a better word, famous, at least in certain corners of the internet. News clips, articles titled, The Janitor Who Held a Research Station Together, Arctic Hero with a Wrench and a Heart. His story was turned into a podcast episode. A short documentary crew reached out. They offered to fly him to New York, interview him on camera. He said no to all of it. I didn't do any of this to be remembered, he told Ellie. She nodded. But maybe that's why people remember you. Open mailbox with raised flag, the letters poured in. Hundreds. From school children, retired veterans, other janitors, single mothers, researchers stationed across the globe. People wrote things like, You made me feel seen. You reminded me that small things matter. I work nights. No one knows my name either. Thank you for carrying us with you. Sam read every one, out loud, to Ellie, over cups of tea, in a living room that finally felt like home. Round pushbin, a new offer, but not the kind you think. One letter came from a small school in Northern Oregon. A principal who wrote, Our maintenance guy just retired after 35 years. I saw your story. I know you've done more than your share. But if you're ever interested in just keeping the boiler warm and the kids smiling, we'd love to have you. Sam read it 3 times, didn't say a word, then smiled. That sounds about right. Evergreen Tree, the little school with the big sky. It was nestled at the edge of a pine forest. One road in, 2 buses, 48 students. They didn't know who Sam was, but they knew he always waved, that he fixed the heater before they felt cold, that he refilled the hot chocolate machine in the teacher's lounge without being asked, that he cleaned the gym bleachers even when no games were scheduled. One third grader, Ava, drew him in crayon, a big man in a green coat, with the caption, Mr. Sam fixes everything. He taped it to the back of his door. Hammer and wrench a new routine. Every morning, unlock the doors, turn on the lights, brew the coffee, Every afternoon, tighten bolts, rake leaves, smile at the kids. Every evening, write one letter. To Ellie, sometimes short, sometimes just one sentence. Today I fixed a lunch table, and they treated me like I rebuilt the moon. Packaged the box he kept. In the supply closet, Sam kept a small wooden box. Inside it, the metal, Ellie's first letter, a photo of his daughter, the stone from the snowman, a folded copy of Max's recommendation, and one note written in Sam's own handwriting. You did good. You kept the lights on. Brain Ellie's visit. She came to visit that spring, brought cookies for the teachers, sat with Sam under the tall trees during recess. You're really not going back up north? I think I found my north. She smiled. You always said you wanted to be useful. Yeah. He looked out over the playground. But now, I just want to be present. They didn't say anything else for a while. Just listened to the wind, to laughter, to the quiet click of a tetherball, rope spinning in the breeze. Round pushpin 10 years later, small-town elementary spring showcase night. The gymnasium was packed. Folding chairs, glitter signs, parents with phone cameras. Tonight's event? Everyday Heroes, a student-led presentation about people who make a difference quietly. Most kids chose firefighters, nurses, teachers. One boy did a dramatic reenactment of Spider-Man's origin. But then, a 9-year-old girl stepped up to the microphone. Curly hair, overalls, a wrench in her back pocket. Her name was Riley. She cleared her throat, held up a piece of paper, and said, My hero is the janitor. His name is Sam. He fixes stuff, like lockers and heat and light switches. But he also fixes quiet things, like when someone's scared of the dark and the hallway light doesn't work, or when the bathroom soap runs out and you think no one notices. He notices. The room went still. A few chuckles, but mostly silence. The kind you feel in your chest. Riley continued. He never yells. He waves at everyone, even the people who don't wave back. One time, he found my drawing in the trash. I was going to throw it away because the face was crooked, but he said, Looks just like you. And he put it on his door. People began looking around the room. At the back, near the exit, stood an old man in a green coat, hands in his pockets, eyes glassy. Try not to smile, too wide, trying not to cry. Riley closed her paper. My mom says he used to work somewhere called Aurora North, where he kept people alive during snowstorms. But now, he keeps us warm. He keeps the lunch line moving. He keeps the lights on. And he says, That's more than enough. She looked up, right at him, and said, Thanks, Mr. Sam. I want to be like you when I grow up. Clapping hands the applause. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was the kind of clapping people do when they feel something real. A few tears, a lot of smiles. Sam just nodded once and walked outside. Sunrise, the final scene. Later that night, Ellie found him sitting on the school steps. Same green coat, same worn boots, a thermos of tea in his hands. The stars beginning to peek out. She sat beside him. You okay? He nodded. Yeah, I think that was the best speech I never gave. She laughed softly. You changed her life, you know. I didn't try to. Exactly. They sat in silence a moment longer. Then Sam said, I used to think I was invisible. He looked up at the sky, but maybe I was just background light, always on, so people could see where they were going. She leaned her head on his shoulder. You were never invisible. He smiled and whispered, Neither were they. Page facing up, epilogue. Years later, Riley became a teacher. Her classroom had a sign above the door. Be the one who notices. Every student who walked in learned Sam's story. Every one of them held the door open. Every one of them believed that small things mattered. And on the wall behind her desk, a framed crayon drawing. A man in a green coat, holding a wrench, smiling. Captioned in a child's handwriting, Mr. Sam fixes everything.